Hello students, today we are discussing about the making of a global world. It's the second video. In the first video we had seen the meaning of globalization and pre-modern world situation, Silk Route and invention of America and how World Trade Center transformed from east to west. So these are all the things we had discussed in the part first. Now we will be discussing part second. Let's see which are the things we have to discuss in this video. In this video, we are concentrating about the world in 19th century, how world changed in 19th century, and the role of technology, how the introduction of technology changed the world trade scenario, and 19th century colonization, colonialism, how European countries started acquiring various nations and making them colonial countries. Then indentured labor, and we are also discussing about interwar economy. That means between the time of First World War and Second World War, how was the economy of the world and what had happened in the time of World War and Great Depression. After the First World War, world faced Great Depression in 1929 and its impact on India also we are discussing. So these are all the things we have to understand in this video. In 19th century, economists identified three types of movement in the world. One, the flow of trade. That means exchanging of goods and services. The second one is flow of labor. That means people started moving from one country to another country for job. And third one is movement of capital. So we have seen in economics chapter globalization, that is MNC, multinational corporations or companies. So they started investing in other countries. So one country investing in other country is called as movement of capital. So these are the three types of flows the economists have identified in 19th century. In 18th century, there was a great change in Britain. All of us know that in 18th century, there was a great change in Europe, that is industrialization. Because of industrialization, people started coming from rural area to cities. Why? You might have known the reason. They started coming to cities in search of jobs. Because in cities, a lot of industries were established. So people from rural areas started coming to cities in search of job. Because of that, there was a great demand for food grains in Britain. And the pressure from landed groups, the government restricted the import of corn because imported corn price were lower than the corn raised in Britain. That's why landed community pressurized the government to stop import of corn. This is known as corn law. Corn law means restrictions over the import of corns from other countries. But the industrialists, city dwellers were against corn law because corn raised within the country, the price is more than the imported corns. That's why they pressurized the government to cancel corn law. That's why corn law was abolished by the government. Along with industrial development, transportation technology also improved. Faster railways, lighter wagons, larger ships helped the food grains to move from one country to other country cheaply and quickly. Because of technological development, animals were slaughtered in the starting point. Earlier, live cattle used to be transported. But now, because of technological development and refrigeration, then animals were slaughtered in America, Australia, New Zealand, and then transported to Europe as frozen meat. This reduced shipping cost and lowered the meat prices in Europe. As you all know, 16th century Africa was discovered, and people of Europe, they saw abundant land and small population there, and people rarely worked for wage. Europeans were attracted to Africa due to its vast resource and land also. But there was an unexpected problem, that was a shortage of labor, and employers used many methods to recruit and retain laborers. They introduced heavy taxes to get the labor. In Africa, Europeans introduced law of inheritance, and finally in 1880s, Rinderpest arrived in Africa. So it was carried by infected cattle imported from British Asia to feed the Italian soldiers. So Rinderpest killed 90% of cattle in Africa. So the Africans who were depending on cattle rearing, now they were forced to labor market. They had to work in the plantations of Europeans. So that's how Europeans got the laborers in Africa. In 19th century, hundreds of thousands of Indians and Chinese, they went to work in the plantations, mines, and construction of roads and railways all over the world. Most Indians indentured laborers came from present-day regions like eastern Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Central Asia, and dry districts of Tamil Nadu. The main destination of Indian indentured migrants were the Caribbean islands: Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname, Mauritius, and Fiji. Recruitment was done by agents. There were some agents to recruit these migrant laborers, and often migrants were not even told they were to embark on a long sea voyage. That means they were not known their destination, where they are going, and which place they have to work, and what will be the working condition. So no information was. As you all know that Indian cotton textile was exported to Europe. Because of industrialization, India's ready-made textile export percentage had come down. We see a steady decline of the share of cotton textile. 30% around 1800, it has come down to 15% in 1850. By 1870s, this proportion had dropped to 3%. See, from 30% to 3%, India's cotton textile export proportion had come down sharply, had come down. In the beginning of 20th century, there was a war, World War, First World War. You know between whom it was fought. One side there were allies, Britain, France, and Russia. Later US joined. On the opposite side, Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Ottoman Turkey was there. This First World War was the first modern industrial war because the machine guns, tanks, aircrafts, chemical weapons were used. Most of the killed and maimed were men of working age. During the war, industries were restricted to produce war-related goods. In the time of war, the major change was when men start going for battle, the women stepped in to undertake jobs earlier only men were expected to do. Britain borrowed large sum of money from US banks as well as US public because to meet the war expenditure, and thus the war transformed US from being international debtor to international creditor. The important feature of US economy was mass production. Well-known pioneer mass production was Henry Ford. He adopted assembly line production by seeing Chicago slaughterhouse. As a result, Henry Ford's car came off assembly line at 3-minute intervals. a speed much faster than achieved by previous method. By 1923, US became the largest overseas lender, and in 1929, world plunged into a depression such as it had never experienced before. So world started facing Great Depression in the time of 1929. By 1929, world started facing Great Depression. It was lasted till the mid 1930s. So it was a catastrophic decline in the production, employment, income as well as trade. Agriculture prices were lower than industrial good prices. Then what were the causes for Great Depression? So many causes are there. The first one, agriculture overproduction. It was a problem. And then in mid 1920s, many countries got money for their investment as a loan from US. US economy wanted to protect itself from the Great Depression. That's why it doubled import duties. On the other hand, US banks slashed domestic lending and called back loans. Farm could not sell their harvest, households were ruined, and business collapsed. This is what we call Great Economic Depression. India's condition was not different than any other countries. As agriculture prices fell sharply, India's peasants were suffering from indebtedness. They used up their savings, mortgaged their lands, and sold whatever jewelry and precious metals they had. The famous economist John Maynard Keynes thought that Indian gold exports promoted global economic recovery. That means India contributed a lot to the world to recover from Great Depression. So in this video, students, we have discussed world in 19th century, how colonization started, how technology transformed the world, and trade and as well as food grains, and why Corn Law was passed and why it was taken back, and role of technology and colonization, how Africa was colonized by various European countries, and indentured labor migration. So my people, they started migrating from India during the wartime. How was the economy? And Great Depression, how the world suffered from Great Depression, and what was the role of India in overcoming Great Depression. So what was the opinion of John Maynard Keynes about India's jewelry export in the time of Great Depression? So these are all the things we had discussed. So we will be meeting with the third part shortly. Thank you very much.